get in to thank Mayor Pro Tem Johnson and Dean Gross from the city of Los Alamitos coming over to Cypress. I thought it's a great step forward. And I think we'll have Prakash. Prakash will be here. Also, Narain from the Little Adri said just to mention he'll be here a little later. I want to thank the Cypress Community Center, Pamela Phillips, and Shelley Myers for all the help in setting this up. And a little later, one of the things that we can do is when there are excess books in the Library of Congress, whenever they find that there are multiple books that they have, Congress members ask for a share, and I've asked for, whatever we have. And so we're going to be presenting to Helen Richardson, the Cypress librarian, those books from the Library of Congress that were excess books, which I think is a great way to utilize resources that we have when they go through a catalog and they find that they have duplicate kinds of books, that we provide that to the libraries in the district. As the Mayor Pro Tem said, in 2011, the California Independent Redistricting Commission changed all the boundaries in the state. I'll talk a little bit later about that, the great proponent of independent redistricting commissions. I think it's the founding fathers were right when they said you can't let the Congress draw their own lines, let the states do it. But I think it's become so complicated now that the next step is really to have fair, nonpartisan commissions draw the lines. Legislators should legislate. They should not draw their own boundaries, because what happens is self-interest supersedes then communities of interest. And you do not have districts that reflect communities. You have districts that are just there to protect incumbency. And so I fought really hard in the California legislature to push for. I led the fight in the California legislature and in Congress. It is a very uphill battle. Learn being your new member of Congress, things don't happen in one term. You just, like everything else in life, you have to establish yourself and develop relationships. But that's one of the things I want to continue to work on. I think that much of the gridlock has to do with people feeling like their vote doesn't count anymore, because maybe it doesn't, because only special interests, large interests on both sides, have access to Congress members and to legislators. They're not accountable to the communities they serve. There's no quick, easy fix. Redistricting is not the total fix, but it's a step in the right direction to give back the power to the people and to take it away from those that have their own interest in drawing. As good as people are, when you sit down late at night and you figure out, well, what do I really want in my district and what I don't, it's just too tempting. So I just think we need a fairer process. And so that's one of the things I'll start that I have taken up in Congress, and I'm going to, you don't do a lot of focus, but that's one of the kinds of things that I have focused on. Another issue that has come from my district, and I'll kind of give you, I serve on a Foreign Affairs Committee and on Natural Resources. You serve as a new member on two committees in the Congress. Foreign Affairs is a great committee for me to serve on for a number of reasons. One, the chairman of Foreign Affairs is Chairman Royce, Ed Royce, and so he's right here in Orange County, and it's given me the ability to work closely with the chairman, and we have developed a very, very strong working relationship. And it's the most bipartisan committee in Congress. It is a committee that almost all the work that comes out of it is in a bipartisan way. Very little comes out that is strictly partisan. Every so often we get a partisan issue, but it's held, and I think Chairman Royce does an excellent job of dealing with that to make sure that all sides are respected. Not that everybody agrees with everything, but it's not a committee that. And also, just to our south, Congressman Rohrabacher is also on Foreign Affairs Committee, and so between Rohrabacher, myself, and Royce, we kind of have three voices from Orange County on foreign affairs. One of the things I've worked on a lot has been, as I've been a new Congress member, just elected in 2012, one of the things I've worked on, or a couple of things I'll just tell you, but one of the things I've worked on a lot has been human rights issues. The reason I've worked on human rights issues is I now represent one of the largest, if not the largest, myself and Dana here and Loretta Sanchez, one of the largest Vietnamese American communities. I represent a large part of Little Saigon and Westminster and Garden Grove. And as a result of listening to my community, I'm a member, and a very active member, on the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. And as part of my responsibilities on that, I have adopted a prisoner of conscience, which is someone who had been an activist in Vietnam who had been arrested by the government and imprisoned. I had a town hall meeting with the ambassador, U.S. ambassador here to Vietnam here, and I'm glad to say it doesn't happen too often, but the Vietnamese government released my prisoner of conscience. Just made me, and I'm very appreciative for them doing it, but I also meant that just gave me an opportunity to adopt more prisoners of conscience and to be out there, because one of the critical things is that Vietnam now wants to participate in what is called the Trans-Pacific Partnership with the United States. I am a strong supporter in general of getting rid of trade barriers and having fair relationships as long as they protect the rights of workers and I think and also environmental protection. But I also believe that if Vietnam wants to have a special relationship with the United States, now is the time to put pressure on them to make sure that they do not arrest people. People have the right to assemble, to have religious, to go to any church or mosque, any place that they want to, and especially if they want special relationships. This is a time to say, hey, you're supposedly democratically elected government, you've got to respect all the people you are. So I'm kind of working on that, and that's been a large part of what I do on the Foreign Affairs Committee. As I mentioned before, when the president came on Air Force One, I have the great fortune of representing the Joint Forces Training Base, and it has given me really a great opportunity to really appreciate both being on Foreign Affairs and also representing the Joint Forces Training Base, which is really our first responders, and if there's ever a crisis here in Southern California, that's the place which will protect us all, whether it's a human-made disaster or a natural disaster. That's really what we're going to use. And it's a place where a lot of people have been deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan and come back, and it's the National Guard, it's the Army Reserve. It's really a critical place. And one of the things I've learned there, and I've also become, because I'm an educator, before I was in the legislature, I was a faculty member at Cal State Long Beach for many years, Go Beach, and taught psychology, a very needed skill in the Congress. There's a few of us that try to, people say, well, what do you do? I say, I listen. They say, no, nobody listens around here. This is not a place where you listen to. You're supposed to do things. But I kind of at least like to listen before I do things. But one of the things I've really come to appreciate at the base is all the time that those that are at the base not only protect us, and I'll talk a little bit about my work with veterans, but also volunteer an extraordinary amount of hours to the community. And we have both here at the base the Sunburst Academy and the Star Base program. Sunburst Academy being for high school students. They live on the base. These are people who never really expect to get through. The kind of people drop out. Well, if they can get through the first 2 weeks in those programs, the gangs that they join is the United States gang. Yeah. They join and they bond and they become great members of our society. So I'm a big supporter of that. And also, the base has become the model program now in the nation for the Star Base. Besides the Sunburst, the Star Base. And that is, we as the Department of Defense has recognized that the United States, in terms of its national security, needs to have people who can come in, who can protect our country, not only in terms of militarily, but who really have the skills of STEM research. science, technology, engineering. I mean, you really, if we want to be a nation, they've got to play a part, defense, in promoting STEM research. And so they've allowed the base to develop one of the unique programs in the country to take fifth graders and really give them hands-on experience the way they would run kind of science-based programs out there. And so I spent a lot of time focusing in the Department of Defense reauthorization, saying, this is a great program. There's a great use of Department of Defense funds. The people in the base love doing it. It gives them meaning more than just, they have great meaning already in their lives, but to do that. And so I've been able to get extra money into the budget to expand it nationwide. And that's really because of the program that's really here. And so we can all take great pride in our base and what those folks do, not only for all of us, but what they do for those kids on their own time. Gets me to another issue. Not only the base, but the 47th district has the Veterans Administration Hospital in Long Beach, which provides this kind of our area's VA hospital. And as you all know, the Veterans Administration has been under a great deal of attack recently. Real questions about how the Veterans Administration works and doesn't work. And I'm very concerned because I want to make sure that our veterans have the kind of care. And I can just tell you, but I also, while doing that, want to tell you I have Mark Polito. Where is Mark? Is in my office here. Eransu Pujadas is in my office, works on my office. And Robin McCrae, who is not here, who does a lot of the veterans work, and Donna Carlos, who does a lot of our government kind of work, people who have played sports, not here, that in our office, and we have satellite offices, one here in Cypress, we have in Stanton, we have in Westminster, but we also have one in Long Beach. We get a lot of people call us all the time about issues. And I will tell you that the Veterans Administration, in terms of our office, does two things. One is all those veterans that are trying to get health issues taken care of immediately at that moment. And that's how do they access the VA? Are they getting the mental health needs that they with so many coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder? And are they getting good medical treatment? Around the country, it's generally accepted that once you can get into the VA and you see somebody, you're going to get as good a treatment as anywhere else in the country. The problem has been in many places getting in and the waits and kind of, so that's the medical side. On the other side, veterans are also, as a part of providing for the health of the country and protecting us, are allowed to have certain kinds of benefits. Disability benefits, benefits in terms of as they age, and to have attendance for people living independently, and many of the injuries that they first occurred when they were first in the military really have repercussions later on in life, and so there's the disability side. In our office right now, we have about 56 to 58 open claims on the disability side. We are finding it very hard to get those folks to the right person to get those benefits in a timely way when they need it. In part, the VA says, well, in part because people are applying for multiple kinds of benefits now. It's not like the old days. But in part because the system really was not equipped to provide the kinds of services that people need when we've just come out of a multiple numbers of wars that people have been in the service for. So we have had less problems with the healthcare side. So while I hear what's going on in the rest of the nation, I have to tell you, here at least in Long Beach, we're going to try to do some follow-up studies for the veterans to actually find out, because you find out that some of the data you get from the VA, unfortunately, and I'm a great believer in data, come from the university, empirical person, I don't really know if I really accept all the data that we're getting. So we'd rather have an accurate. But I will tell you, at least in our district, we have less calls of people saying they want on the healthcare side. I'm not saying the mental health, but on the healthcare side. It's still too long. So I went up to the VA about a month ago, up to the VA regional office, and I was told I was the first Congress member to come up to the regional office, which is up in LA, and said, this is all unacceptable. I need to see the regional director and meet with the people who provide, oversee the VA in our region, because it still takes potentially up to a year to get your benefit, to get benefits, sometimes up to 2 years. One of the problems in the VA is that they have not done a very good job of converting everything to electronic records. Members of the military over the years move around a whole lot. Veterans move around. Records get lost. People do not know where these records are. They're just trying to convert records, and it's critically important that when a veteran comes in, that we're able to access those records immediately and provide them the right kinds of service. We're not able to do that right. So I'm kind of pushing them to really do that, and I'll answer any questions. But that's going to continue my thing, that we get those numbers down. We get people to be, 3 months, 4 months, 120 days, 90 or 100. Not for the hospital. The hospital should be able to get medical benefits within a week. Get the other ones, you should have your case closed for 3 months. It's now a year, 2 years on the other side. We have to deal with that. But that's another issue that I'm kind of working on.
You want us to ask questions now?
I'm going to kind of talk for another about 10 minutes, and I'm going to say in about an hour. So I'm kind of laying out what I do or don't do, and then, then you can jump on me and say, Diana's really getting ready to do. I mentioned also, so I think that we have to have reform in terms of both how the VA operates, and I also think we need reforms in how we draw boundaries, and star-based funding. One of the critical issues right now, the other major critical issue that's before us in foreign affairs, obviously, is there's a number of issues. I got to tell you, there's a crisis a week that goes on in this world. Mr. Putin marches into Crimea and decides that he has the right to grab another country apart. That's just unacceptable. But obviously, one of the major issues right now is what's taking place with ISIS in Iraq. I am not a great advocate. I am not an advocate of U.S. military going in again. I think the real issue has to be a political solution. What has happened was that after the fall of Saddam Hussein and Iraq seemed to, after a number of starts, maybe with U.S. help, began to move towards a new democratic government. They elected a president. It was questionable in the first election, but they elected a president, Mr. Maliki. What has occurred, though, is that while Saddam Hussein really represented protected, which was not the majority of the country, but at least a significant minority, represented more the Sunni faction in Iraq. Iraq has 3 major ethnic groups. There's the Kurds, there's the Sunnis, and there's the Shia. Mr. Maliki did not form, after tremendous insistence by many of the countries that supported his development, did not form a unity government, and has had a difficult time. He is having anyone in the government besides the Shia. And so we have a government in Iraq that just represents the Shia. The Kurds were upset by this. The Sunnis tribes were upset by this. And ISIS has exploited this situation that's already there. But these are long-standing things, and I think we can promote democracy. I do not think that any kind of military invasion will do anything at this moment to calm that down. What needs to be calmed down is, and I'm not saying I support the terrorism that ISIS, and we are some of the worst killers in the world, what they do when they march in. But I think that cooler heads have to prevail, and if Iraq is to exist in the future as a unity, it has to be a unified government. You can't have one side, and you have to have all the tribal leaders and everyone come to grips with this and deal with this, and that's going to be much more the solution. And the United States cannot impose it, and we cannot enforce it, and we cannot create, and so that's where I am on that. But it's complicated, I gotta tell you, it is very painful as a member of the Congress to have reports on what is taking place in Syria, of how some of these people are treatment of individuals and children and refugees and people leaving their homeland, and poor Jordan have to accept all these refugees from another country because no one else will feed them. I mean, it's a little overwhelming, the whole thing. Not that we can solve it all, but it's still very, very sad. But so I'm a big supporter in our veterans and on our Department of Defense. I do not think our role is to go everywhere in the world and to do that, and I don't believe that. So that's kind of where I think about Iraq. But stay tuned. I did vote against on the Department of Defense authorization that I just told you. I voted for the monies, additional monies, and helped put in for the STEM program. I also voted against any military involvement in Iraq. So if you want to get on my case, that's what I stood for. I said that's not really what we should be spending our money and providing the president. I think that we have to be very cautious. That does not mean the United States, everybody turns to us, is not still, but the use of military force has to be thought through very carefully because it has to have an exit strategy. We have to understand what our goals really are and what's really doable because it's, maybe it's just me. We've struggled here in the United States now for over 200 years as our democracy evolves. Whether it's voting rights issues, or slavery in the past, or women's issues of getting the vote, and it's taken us over a couple of hundred years. Many of these countries have democracy only for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, and they are really at the beginning stages. They have to move forward if we really want, I think, a safer world and people really having their voices heard. But there are going to be a lot of false steps along the way, and we can't solve all of them. So that's kind of where I am at that. But I'm never going to walk away from it if there's a humanitarian crisis.
Yes. You're going to talk about immigration?
Yes, let's go on to immigration. He wants to talk about immigration.
Kids coming across the border?
They're separate issues, and I will talk about all those issues. I will try to separate. They may not be separate. They're all interrelated. Don't get me wrong. They are, but I will talk about them kind of in tandem, or maybe how they're all interconnected. The first issue is we have a broken immigration system, I believe, a totally broken immigration system. Whether you're talking about border security on one hand, whether you're talking about students who come to the United States as the brightest and the best in their country, and then when they want to get their graduate degrees in engineering and science and other courses, we say, well, it's nice knowing you, even though and they want to stay and set up the entrepreneurs in this country, and we send them home because we don't have a way of really understanding that, because we haven't really looked at some of these numbers for a long time, whether it's 11 to 12 million people who have been in the country for a long time, who really have no status at all, and we have to figure out. I personally am a believer in comprehensive immigration reform that has both border security, that it also focuses on, having some pathway. I like the bill. It's been over a year that a bill came out of the U.S. Senate, bipartisan bill, Republicans and Democrats, sent it to the House. We have not been able to take up that bill in the House. I will tell you this, to be honest, I'm a Democrat. Most or many of the California Republicans are very supportive of comprehensive immigration reform. This is not a California issue. Not saying everybody in California is, but we understand that we want fairness in California, I believe. We want people to live by the rules. We don't want to have open borders, but we want to also make sure that we treat people and we set the standards and we deal with reality instead of at least not sweeping it under the rug. And so that's where I am about that. That's in the larger picture of how we're going to do it. And as I say, I'm very much concerned right now with one of the problems I have, besides, as I mentioned before, some of the human rights issues in the Vietnamese community. I also have a very large Latino community. I have a very large Cambodian community in Long Beach. I represent Little Cambodia. And there are some real problems with our immigration laws around deportations. There are many people who came to the United States in the 1970s who, for example, in my district, who, after the killing fields, where there was a genocide that took place in Cambodia, over 2 million Cambodians were murdered by Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge, one of the most horror stories of our time. They came to California and to the rest of the country. Many of them settled here in Southern California. And many of them came from an entirely different culture, and some of them at a young age got into trouble. But they've lived for 20 and 30 years since then, in the 80s and 90s, went to school. Many of them now are finding that because we don't really have a system that's broken, that many of them are now being deported. Now, people who are a danger to the states should be deported. But people who've been good citizens and have been worked their way and gone to school and now getting deportation because we have a broken system, and I'm finding that rips families apart is not what it's all about in this country for me. I think that we try to keep families together, and we try to make sure that people can, and that we have a system. And I'll get back to answering any questions on that, but I just want to kind of lay out where I am and then kind of move forward. So that's one thing. The next issue that is happening, and I'm just kind of trying to understand and get my arms around it, and I'm not here to give you an answer, because is that primarily what has occurred, although there's been porous borders, and we can talk about in general border security, they're specifically primarily in the heartland of the country in Texas. There's been a large number of young children that have come from Central America. The question is why they came and what their role is, and the question is how are we going to deal with these large numbers of young children that have come. Right now, the model is, or what it is for them to live either in Army bases or in bases, and then to have, or if they have family here, to be with their family, but only for a very short period of time until they are then sent back to their country. And there is no other option, but at this moment where we are, but to send them back. We have not had a national discussion on it. On what that role should be. I'd love to hear your things. It's more complicated. There are terrible problems that are going on in Central America also, where parents are not wild about giving up their kids, but that's part of the problem, is because they fear for their safety. Does that mean we should accept them? Well, that's what I need to hear from you to talk about that issue. But that's really what's going on, and as I say, it has not really overwhelmed us here in California yet. But there will be some attempts to use some of our mill, both in Ventura County and also on the border, as the overflow from Texas, because we're not really seeing those young kids coming this way. That doesn't mean we don't have our own issues with the border, but the issue about that. And I'm here to listen. That is just occurring now. We don't have any real policy on that. I'm just saying, in part it breaks my heart. I understand it. In part, I think it's part of the problem is we don't have a comprehensive reform. We haven't done that since President Reagan. Don't have clear guidelines, and everybody is feeling kind of pulled apart a little bit. So that's immigration, and as I say, I want to listen to you on any of those issues, because we don't have any clearly defined policy yet. And I think I talked about Iraq. The other thing I'm going to tell you, I am a believer, and I am a believer because I'm an academic, and you may say, well, so what I mean is I am a believer that regardless of how much human involvement there is in climate change, there is climate change occurring, and there is some human involvement in it. And that our district is going to suffer greatly. Greatly. We are dependent upon, one of the things about California is its location. It's both ocean location, and the fact that we are the center of the transportation hub for the nation in terms of the movement of goods through our ports and our communities. It just creates great jobs. I want those jobs to be as clean as possible, and I push to change the trucks and to do it, but we still need those jobs. We want those jobs. And we just want them cleanly. There will be potentially by the next, if we do nothing, somewhere, and we're not sure how much, by the next 70 or 80 years, anywhere sea level rise from 2 to 7 feet, and that will completely devastate our infrastructure. that I would rather see 2 feet than 7 feet, and see what we're gonna have. Well, we are now, I believe, at a place where we can have a long range, have a plan. We're not gonna disrupt everything right away, but we have to have a long range plan to deal with it. That's me talking, you know, and I'm gonna be a big advocate of that. And I realize that others will say, no, it's, you know, you're over exaggerating, it's not gonna, I get it all. I'm just telling you, you know, you need to know where your congressman is. So that's kind of some of the critical issues that I've been working on. I spend more time on those issues in natural resources and the issues on human rights and crises and human rights issues on foreign affairs, and then the other issues. But I'll answer any question you want to talk about, minimum wage or anything else. But let's just, I've finished my little.